We're thinking about having the setup like this. I will ask you to set forth a question, and it's best if you start by introducing yourselves, and then setting forth the question and telling whom it's for, whether it's for one person, two person, or everybody on the panel. So, the word is yours.
My name is Steinn Arnar Jónsson. I work for Hugsun. My question is for the rest of the panelists. Can I get your take on John Seddon's comments in his presentation, specifically about lean maybe being a fad, if I am quoting him correctly? Just curious about what you thought about the presentation.
Well, the way I put it, and in my books, I also have, there's a section in the Toyota Way, for example, called Lean Six Sigma, just a bunch of tools, question mark, where I tried to equally criticize Lean Six Sigma because there are people that associated me in the Lean camp who thought I was criticizing only Six Sigma, so I wanted to show them I could be just as critical of Lean, but I think that what I heard from John, what I got out of it was criticizing a particular way of thinking where you start with the tools and people are trying to sell their consulting services and they're selling specific results based on specific projects that use specific tools. They go away, and what you learn is if I develop standardized worksheets, or if I use A3 problem solving and fill out a form like this, or if I develop a value stream map, I'm going to get these results without really understanding the purpose of the process and what the levers for improvement are and how to increase flow and how to actually change the system. And then you go to people in Toyota, and I've heard lots of people who are surprised because they might take a tour of Toyota and they say, well, where are your value stream apps? And they can't find any. Or where's your design of experiments, your Taguchi methods? And they can't find any because Toyota's not using these tools. They're solving problems and they're improving the system. So the people who've been Toyota trained or who have somehow learned the philosophy don't like the lean toolheads either. Again, the word has taken on currency, but when I see lean, I'm thinking about systems thinking, I'm thinking about developing people, engaging people in problem solving. I'm not thinking about value stream mapping and A3 reporting and 5S and those tools. Somebody else might think of that association. So it's partly how do you define the word team. And as I said, the original concept by the graduate student who named it was like a healthy athlete, and think about developing a healthy organization that has tremendous skills, tremendous depth, and can learn over time. Again, that was the image. It wasn't somebody that is really good at putting Post-its on the wall.
So let's go next.
Can I just say one thing? I think Iceland is very sensitive, especially for consultants today. We're a young market, and we're an easy prey, so to say, for consultants to come here with pre-packaged solution, implement, and then go. And it's in their interest that you phone them again and say, this doesn't work, please come and help me, and you pay them more money. So I think what Iceland should rather do is what Toyota did, is to learn what are your problems and learn and find solutions to your problems, not some pre-packaged, nicely wrapped system. So that is at least my take.
A small remark on my side. I mean, for me, it doesn't matter what you call it. As I said, you can call it George. It's about just taking the time to understand what efficiency means for your organization, and then look around to see what tools and techniques are out there that can help you. And so I'm very much against these, what I call the turf wars of techniques. It doesn't really matter, but in some cases a Kaizen event may help you, in some cases it's a PDCA exercise. It's not about the tools, it's about understanding where you are today, where you want to be tomorrow, and where you want to be in a year's time, and how you respond to the market. So for me, I don't know, I'm kind of oblivious. I mean, I listen to Jeffrey, he talks a lot about the Toyota way. I love Toyota, I love Lean, but I don't necessarily like the word. I listen to John, and he thinks that Lean sucks, I think. But that's okay too, because he's talking about a methodology that's about driving efficiency into the organization. So let's just leave it at George for the time being, in my book.
Magnús.
Yes, I like John's presentation a lot, and maybe then I will reveal that I didn't understand it at all. But John says, change the system. What I hear him say is redesign the process. And that is, I think, what we are doing, and this is the process model approach. Look for the problems in the design of the process rather than in the execution. So maybe he will correct me later, but that's my take on it. But I also agree with the tools. The consultant doesn't change the mentality. He or she may introduce a method or a tool, but this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon about implementing the right culture, the right mentality.
Yes, and just to finish off, I love the question. It was fantastic, and I also was squirming in my seat. You used the word. I forget how you described it, but I was squirming as well. You used, John was interesting. He said the who, what, and why around any tool. He said any instructor, any teacher should ensure that they know the who, what, and why of any tool they teach. I think that also applies to the methodology, and ask the who, what, why, and I think each of the speakers today was very careful to ensure that the tool or the methodology, if we use the words interchangeable, matches the application. So I used in my presentation the idea of a tack hammer versus a sledgehammer, or a jackhammer versus a small shovel to turn over earth. I think it's important that we who are being tasked by our organizations to lead change is we don't blindly follow any fad or any single one methodology. As a matter of fact, it's almost made more difficult with the choices that we have out there. We need, and it's our obligation to the organization, to shift through and sort through the myriad and the amazing amount of data and material that's out there. So it's fun to listen to John, and it's fun to listen and think about system, but what we're all tasked with is how do we make that change? What are the tools? What are the methods? And it's not necessarily just as easy to say, I'm just going to go change the system. The bank that I will be moving to has 240,000 employees, speaks 17 different languages, and is in 9 time zones. How do you do that in a methodical and an organized way to move a company without, as Ear showed, the people running in every direction? Because that's not progress. It's busy for the sake of being busy. Those vectors, those people need to be aligned and moving in a single direction. So call it a system, call it a method, call it a tools, or a set of tools, or call it George, as Ear says. It still comes down to our role is to figure out how to do that. So ask. I think those are great questions. That's my takeaway from today. Ask the who, the what, and the why before go and doing anything. So it was a good wake-up call. It's a wake-up call to all of us, and I think that was an excellent way to, as we said, to end the session, because it's a warning to all of us not to just follow blindly a single method or a single set of tools.
So, any comment from you, John?
Well, I guess this is feedback to me that I didn't do as good a job as I hoped I might have done. It was Deming who pointed out the obvious truth to me that we, mankind, invented management. And my thesis is management thinking has to change. We design our organizations in functional hierarchies. We separate decision making from work. You know, managers make decisions, workers do the work. Managers make decisions with arbitrary measures, typically. In Deming's language, they tamper with their systems. You know, so my message to you is that what Ono proved was a challenge to conventional thinking. And so as a psychologist, I'm interested in how do you change conventional thinking. Well, I've talked a lot about that. And it ain't just redesigning the process, because around the process you've got measures, you've got roles, you've got structure, all that changes. Everything changes. But that's my thesis. And, you know, as it happened, you know, I work for very big multinationals that are doing this. You know, and Aviva at the moment is now going around the world, and there's, you know, a big discussion about whether they do it or we do it. It doesn't matter as long as you've got the right competence to help people study and change their system. The answer is, you know, how do you do a big company? It's like, how do you eat your elephant? You know that one, don't you? One spoonful at a time. It's easy. So that's my feedback to me. That clearly didn't come across clearly enough. I'll try harder next time.
Let's stay on the subject though, because I think it's interesting. Dr. Leichert and I, we were speaking about, or Jeffrey, we were speaking about, okay, we're speaking to an audience. How many CEOs are out there? How many chairmen of the boards are out here today?
Well, there won't be.
No, I guess, I know the question I have is, not many of us are the leaders, not many of us are the CEOs, so how do we, the people who are being tasked to be the change agents, how can we communicate that? You do it eloquently, and it's a beautiful presentation.
It's a good question. Well, thank you very much. It's a good question. I want to answer it. What you do not do is go and try and persuade them. That's how that quality director in Spain got kicked out. Okay? Well, you see, you know, can you imagine, you know, the quality director says, I've been out and studied this. I've been following John's work, I've studied this, and actually the problem is the incentives. You know, what do the board do? Oh shit, no, we believe all that stuff. Get rid of him. And aided and abetted by the consulting firm, or he's not cooperating. That's what they do. What he should have done, and my advice to you is this. So I'm saying, don't try to persuade. Do anything that makes them curious. Okay, curious is a very important word, because the curious person will pursue an idea for themselves. They will read something, they'll view something, they might go out into their organisation and start to look, but it kind of goes from curious to understanding. It starts opening the door and understanding. The important thing is they are doing this. If you try to push it at them, they just think you're a nutcase. And you know, I'm near the end of my career. The number of people who've phoned me up after we've worked with them, and they ring me up and they say, geez, I wish I'd never met you. It just made my life hard.
Good answer.
Thank you.
My name is Ásta. I come from Actavis. I come from the sales department to the third-party clients within Actavis. We have decided, my department, to implement the lean thinking, and we are doing the office and service lean primarily. So I don't remember who it was, but somebody talked about turning the labor into robots. So what I didn't quite get is that a good thing or a bad thing? Should we turn we are standardizing all the processes and everybody's doing the same thing, and I'm thinking, okay, I wouldn't want to do that, you know, I would want to have some flexibility of what I'm doing while I'm working. So if you keep going leaner and leaner and leaner, what's left? Are we turning the labor into robots? Is the message that we should turn our labor into robots, or should we leave some room for drama? Or
in manufacturing into it, and I was talking about manufacturing, there is a need for a lot of standards. There's some serious potential safety issues, and you need standards around that. There's some very serious, obvious quality issues, and you need standards around that. And then also, when the jobs are highly repetitive, like on an assembly line, continually improving means having standardized work for a particular job. As one academic studying Toyota said, that what what Toyota did was to turn Taylorism on its head. Taylorism was an industrial engineer, the father of industrial engineering, and his vision was that the experts who do the thinking should be separate from the people who do the work. So the industrial engineers are the experts on standardized work. And what Toyota did is said the experts on standardized work are the people who do the work. The engineers can give them some ideas or maybe get them started, but you need to then give control to the standardized work, to the work groups, so that they can use this as a tool for continual improvement. And by having standardized work, at least we know as a starting point where we are, and then when we see deviations, we can either correct the deviations if they're bad, or we can use the deviations to improve. And the work group typically does have targets. For example, a target for a group leader for the year might be to improve productivity by 20%. And he'll get the whole team together, and they'll be finding a few seconds here and a few seconds there and a few seconds there, and by the end of the year they'll have 2 less people. Those people won't be fired. So people are actually participating in productivity improvement who in traditional organizations would lose their jobs. So it's a whole different philosophy and system, and the goal of the standardized work in manufacturing is to help people think. So it's to not make them robots, but to make them more innovative, to find creative ways to keep on improving the standards. Now, I talked to John about service organizations, and he believes that there is no real usefulness for that kind of standardized work in a service organization where there's just so much more variability in the jobs, and which may well be true for the kind of detailed standardized work that I'm talking about in highly repetitive jobs. But again, the point is always to make people think, not to make them robots. But if what they're doing is, for example, best practices, we heard a lot about spreading best practices. We worked also with a rental car company, and we would work with a site, and the people would come up with very creative ways to improve flow and to improve the rental site. And then people from the corporate office would then say, good, now we can create a new standard and make everybody do it around the world at a rental site. And we said, no, don't do that. You know, these people came up with that solution, and it's working for them right now. Hopefully they'll keep on improving on it. If that's a standard, you've now frozen the process. You're not going to get any more improvement. And in addition to that, the people you impose that on will resent it, and they'll make it fail. So best practices, you talk about, ask why did this happen? What was the problem that you were trying to solve? There's a problem they're trying to solve perhaps at the London Heathrow Airport, which is very different than the problem at the New York City airport. But if you copy the best practice, that is the result of they're solving that problem, you're not going to solve the right problem in New York City. So it's actually dangerous to share that kind of standard, say this is the best practice, everybody should do it this way. Again, you kill thinking, and killing thinking and killing learning is ruining the whole intention of whatever we're talking about, whether it's system thinking, continuous improvement, lean. The only way that you can keep it alive is if people doing the work and those who directly supervise them are continually improving the process, continually trying to find new problems to solve, real problems, prioritizing them, and they do have to check in some way whether they're getting better or not on some metric.
I just want to add on that, because to some extent I fundamentally disagree, because I think there's a difference between standardization and understanding end-to-end flow. So, I mean, I made the remark earlier, you can't improve if you don't have standardization, but you have different level of standardization. So as Jeffrey said, on a manufacturing floor, you'll have it down to detailed task instruction. But if you don't understand how your organization operates from a high-level perspective, then you just create chaos, and you start repeating. You start repeating, putting out fires. I think it was Einstein who said, you know, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And I've worked with a lot of services organization, and when we work with departments like sales and marketing, we do take time to understand the end-to-end flow. We don't write task instruction because we don't want to block their creativity and their ability to innovate, but because we have the high-level understanding and we have a platform where they can collaborate on, they can start to share practices. And I mean, you have to be also very real about it. I mean, I'm working with a large oil company at the moment, and they are in 52 different countries. Someone mentioned when you have a large-scale operation, and you can't, if you don't understand on a global level, at least the high-level flow, there will be local variations, and there has to be room for innovation. But if you don't have an image of an end-to-end flow for that specific process on a worldwide level, how on earth are you supposed to set any kind of strategy to deliver your objectives for the year? That's my opinion, but
Yeah, but
I think he disagrees.
yeah, I disagree, but I guess it's useful for you to understand that, what the conference organizers did was bring a lot of strong-minded, strong-willed gurus from all over who sometimes have differences of opinion. So it might be confusing, particularly if you're new to this, it might be confusing. Do you use the word lean? Do you not use the word lean? Do you do Six Sigma? Do you simply ask, what is the purpose of the system? Do you try to map out the end-to-end flow before you start anything? Do you always start with 5S? If I were listening to this day, and I didn't know much, I would be pretty confused. So there's some benefit sometimes in having one guru in the room. But just one short story in Toyota Motor Sales. Toyota Motor Sales in the United States actually doesn't practice lean very well. And they started a lean program, and different parts of Toyota approached it differently. And there was one part where they deal with taxation, and they have a chief financial officer who I have great respect for, and I think she's just a really good thinker. And she decided, I'm not going to start with end-to-end flow because people don't have the capability yet for even solving the most simple problem. And she encouraged them to make very quick kaizens, and she tasked the managers to come up with a certain number of kaizens, and she would reward them, but she would reward them with things like a Starbucks card that had $25 on it. She just randomly would walk around and say, good job, and give them a card. And she would eat lunch with the winners of the month who had the best suggestions. And she could care less what the savings were. She just wanted to stimulate the organization to think, stimulate people to think, and learn the basic problem-solving methodology. And she wanted them in A3 format so you could see that they're thinking clearly about the problem, the root cause. And then by the second year, she felt they'd matured enough that they did they called it a big paper exercise. And it was end-to-end, looking at a very, very complex compliance auditing process. And they spent an enormous amount of time trying to understand the way it's done, and they worked on improvements, and it led to a very big improvement that was measurable to the bottom line in a way that mattered to that size company. And then in the third year, people said, well, we're tired of doing all these kaizens that don't connect up to a high-level goal target for the organization. And they were actually asking the chief financial officer to set aggressive targets for the year. And they said, we know we can make the targets. And what she had done, and I'm not saying that this is the only way to do things, but what she had done in that case was start small by just building basic capability, think clearly about problems, then build up to a more challenging end-to-end process, then build up to the people actually pulling and asking her to set tough targets for her, so it ended up in Hoshin Conry. To me, that was a wonderful example, and I just see so many organizations starting with these great end-to-end maps, and it doesn't mean anything because it's too abstract and people don't have the skills to achieve anything that's on the future state map anyway.
I'd like to try and answer your question and not engage in this debate here. If I think I heard you say that someone's worked out what it ought to be, or what it ought to be, and then kind of brought it to the people. If that's what you said, then that's a mistake. I think what we would all agree on, or maybe on this platform, is that you have to have design in process. Okay? So it's about those people who do the work having the wherewithal to study it and improve it. Okay? That's the most important thing. If you keep separation of design from process, then you're in trouble. Or you won't improve very well. Does that answer your question?
Can I have one brief answer coming directly to your question? I think that standardizing processes or standardizing work is not the same as standardizing a job. So you will not be creating a robot. Standardized work is about safety and quality, and you need that. But you want to have multi-skilled employees that are today working on this process and on another process tomorrow. So it has nothing to do with standardizing the job and creating robots, in my opinion. So we just want to channel the initiative and engagement of our employees into the right direction. I don't want to have an operator trying some new methods on pot tending an electrolysis pot with 380 kiloamps running through it. We do it on another venue.
Hey, shall I give you an example of the only thing that's standardized in Aviva's claims organisation? It's the conversation. And the old design of claims is you make a claim, then we make you prove it, and then we put you through a load of hoops, and we second guess it, and we piss you off, and you hire lawyers. That's how it used to be. Extraordinarily, when they studied it, they found any lawyer letter that came in had to be scanned into their IT system, so they outsourced that like you do. And when it was all redesigned, they found they saved £1.1 million a year on scanning lawyers' letters. Now, the only thing that's standardised, it's not really standardised, it's the design is, what's the first thing you've got to do when someone calls in with a claim? And the answer is, have a conversation about what's fair and reasonable. And then once that's agreed, the flow goes clean. But the flow is not always the same. Okay? Now, we clearly differ, but maybe Aviva's got a lot to learn. But if they say to me, oh, maybe John, we should now standardise all these new... No, I wouldn't. That's what got you into trouble in the first place.
But that's still end-to-end flow, isn't it? Someone calls and they do something, so these are a set of activities that the employee does. So
yeah.
How is that not flow?
Of course it's a flow, but it's not standardised. In other words, it's about every demand can create its own flow.
So if you...
That's a clever company, isn't it?
No, just a question then to you. So you have the claim agents in 52 countries. And
well, we haven't done 62 countries.
Okay, 62. You've got, 100,000 calls coming in on a month, and every employee is completely incentivized to deal with it the way they want.
Are they?
No, I'm asking.
No, of course not. We don't have any incentives at all.
There is some kind of...
Why would you want incentives in a system like that? It would be a very bad thing.
I'm just trying to understand the difference between...
Every employee is trained to handle the predictable demand, to have a conversation with the customer about what's reasonable and fair.
Okay, so how could they be trained if there's nothing to train them in? There's no standards.
Well, okay.
I'm confused.
There we are. Well, the answer is they've been trained because the managers have studied demand. They know all the demands that are going to occur. They also are trained to what to do when they've got a demand they're not trained for. That's how it works.
But yeah, so I think it's a definition thing, because that is a process.
Clearly.
In my...
How foolish I am.
Oh, come on.
Is there any value to anybody learning from somebody else?
Of course. That's how they learn.
And if I learn from you and we share it as a group and we agree that's a good way of responding to a problem like this, couldn't you call that kind of a standard?
Oh, there we are. No. Well, I wouldn't call it a standard, Jeffrey. You create an environment, because there are no incentives, you create an environment where everyone cooperates, and the job is solve customer problems, so you can pull help, is the way we think about it, from anybody. So you might pull help from me, or I might pull help from you, that's cool. The measures are the thing, there we are, that's the only thing that's standardised is measurement. And all the measures relate to the purpose of the service from a customer's point of view. They're all what we would call leading measures. There are no lagging measures, no arbitrary measures.
But how did you get started, How
study
do,
the system.
yeah, but, so I'm a new employee, I'm coming in to the system. How do you get started?
Well, it's an interesting question, you know, because if you take something like a service centre in financial services, in the old way of doing things, the typical training time for a new call centre agent was about 8 weeks. Okay, this is kind of like an industry standard around the world, actually. It seems that everyone takes 8 weeks. You know, and they try and train you in everything in 8 weeks. Because they haven't studied demand, they don't know why the customer school, they train you in everything, all the policies, the procedures, all the IT systems, all that stuff. And then you can imagine, you know, so you go to work, day 1, week 9, you're scared to death. Okay? In these designs, because they know demand, they train you on the high frequency predictable value demands.
Yeah.
So, and
They train you
They train
with their, what?
Oh, with standardized training.
Yeah, I guess.
Oh, I said that terrible word. And the important thing is then they go to work in 2 weeks and confident, not only about what they're able to do, but also about where to get help. And because we've understood the demand, we know what help needs to be placed around them. Now, if you like, you know, I would describe that as a set of principles for service design. If you want to call it standardization, God bless you.
Yeah.
It's language, isn't it? I react to all the numpty standardization that I see in health service designs, in many public sector designs, in financial services, in telecommunications, put in by people who think that standardization is the way to go.
But you will agree we could call it a standard.
You can call it whatever you want. If it makes you happy.
Okay, so the principle, you know, that comes out of Ono and Toyota is that without a standard, there is no improvement. And what he means by that is that if we as a group, if we all have our own way, and we as a group don't come to some agreements, then any new way is just another random way.
You know,
And how dull. I'm sure this is exciting to you to think that there's a world where there could be no rules, no standards, and it all works.
See, this is my life. You know, he could be a command and control manager. I didn't say no rules. I didn't say no standards. You know, it's like people kind of react when I talk about you shouldn't have targets and arbitrary measures. They say no measures. That's absurd. It's a thinking problem.
So, off the topic of standards. Does anyone have a question?
My name is Björn Anton. I'm from HRV Engineering. All of you, great lectures. Thank you. One thing, coming from an engineering company, we are not producing something else than paper. So, office Kaizen, that's something that you can tell us something about.
Your customers take a view of you not just from the engineering products and things that you provide, but from every transaction they have with you. You know, so if they're calling up for service issues, maintenance issues, the way you do invoicing, all of these things can and should be studied because they form the view the customer has of your business. But I'm not a fan of Kaizen.
Can I be next? If I would be an engineering firm, first of all, I would check what does my customer want and do I have a problem with him. And then I would get all the people that would be involved in that, get them in one room, map the flow and discuss the problems and how we could solve them. And then you would probably find many, many, many projects that you could work from. And from that, you would, try to, look at end flow and see how you could work on it. That's my take on it. But you can use the same methods as I described in my thing by doing it on the flow, and instead of going, to the production floor, you're either going to your customers and seeing what they're doing, or if you're mapping your process flow on your computer to have the screen up and do it that way. So there are many ways.
Well, I have a book called The Toyota Product Development System that's several hundred pages that talk about what we learned from looking at product development in Toyota. At the time, they were by far the best in the industry in lead time and quality. And one of the key things, as I mentioned earlier, in product development, and I don't know about your particular case, but in in a complex product, one of the big problems is simply communication across people in different functions. And what I see in many of the companies we work with on helping them with product development is that they have a sales organization that's supposed to get, and John had mentioned the case of the plumbing, the sales organization that's supposed to get the customer requirements through marketing surveys, and then that gets filtered down to some sort of report that generates specifications, which gets to a certain engineering department, and then they develop a concept, and then it's handed off to another engineering department that details the design, and you get this waterfall effect, and where the information is getting distorted and changed as each function does their job. So the biggest problem goes back to, in the 80s, people started looking at concurrent engineering, and just the basic idea of getting the right people in the room to talk to each other is a good start. Toyota has their own unique system, which is based on a chief engineer who is the integrator from the voice of the customer through to manufacturing, and that has really helped them a lot, and many organizations have been following that chief engineer, trying to follow that chief engineer system, where the chief engineer is knowledgeable technically, has a big picture view of what the customer wants and what the product should look like, and is maintaining that customer voice, is running around making sure the right people are talking to each other, and also has very strong people skills. So it takes decades to develop within Toyota a chief engineer. Some of them are better than others, but all of them are super people, and they have a lot of authority, and they can't be easily overruled. For example, management often late in the process says, I think it would be neat if you added this feature, or if it looks like this, and they can't do that in Toyota so easily. So those are some of the things that we've worked on. Again, these are in big companies with thousands of people in different departments, and you actually have to look at each product they're producing in each project as a kind of a value stream, as an end-to-end process, and give a team of people control over that, and you want them to innovate, and you want them to think at every step of the process.
I've got a question for Jeffrey, if I may.
Okay.
How did you rate Taichi Ono's people skills? Short answer.
Terrible.
Thank you. Terrible. Get that? Terrible. Terrible.
But
he was a genius. Okay. And people loved him. People would kill for him. I work with leaders who will frighten the life out of their managers on a Monday and then have them die for him on a Friday. All this respect for people stuff is horseshit. It is not a point of intervention, is the way I think about it. I see organisations doing let's do respect for people programs. Oh, for Christ's sake. It's a consequence. People respected Ono because of the work he did. And his people skills were pants. So I think this respect for people stuff's a red herring. It's a conventional Western management interpretation, because we think it's people that matter. It's the system.
I so not agree with you.
At first, when you said 95% was the system, and then somebody was saying, well, does that mean that that only 5% is the people? Then I thought you meant that the people are the system ultimately. The people. But now it sounds like you really believe that the system is 95%, and the people don't matter.
See, I didn't say that. Did I say people don't matter? Did I say that? I didn't, did I? I said intervention on people issues is a red herring, but it's a popular red herring amongst Western management thinkers. The paradox is, you saw those people in Aviva, were they intrinsically motivated? Did they score on Dan Pink's autonomy, mastery and purpose? You bet. Were they buzzing and full of life? You bet. Was there any intervention on the people? None at all.
One more question.
Yes, my name is David Ludvigsson, coming from the Federation of Icelandic Industries. I will start to thank all the panelists for very good and high quality lectures today. I have a simple question here. In Iceland, we are a land of in a reconstruction after probably the biggest financial crisis any country have got into, caused by several factors. I will not go to details in that, but we have written a report, studied actually the causes in few thousand pages of reports, but nothing really is happening in the reconstruction process. So my question is, since we have a wonderful panel here, could you give us any advice, especially at the political level? Can we learn something from the, you will called it Lean, George, or John thinking, which we can apply? So maybe it is a question for Seddon, and I think Brendon Harder has maybe a saying it is.
John volunteered to go first, so okay. After you, John.
So you're always first, John.
Well, okay. I mean, a couple of things I would say. I don't think it's going to help you that much, but you know, I've been reading economics over the last few years, and started to understand how little economists actually know. The light came on for me when someone explained to me that economists, they try to explain, as opposed to they're there to account for rather than give any theory and knowledge. So my advice to politicians is don't listen to economists. I'm also reminded of the title of Deming's second book, The New Economics. And his argument was quite straightforward, that economic value is created through productive activity. Correct. You know, I mean, hats off to Iceland for telling the rest of the world to go hang for the dead. Europe, in my view, should have done the same. The vibrancy of an economy is down to good economic activity in its manufacturing and service and other sectors. And so I think every politician should A, stop listening to economists, and B, read Deming on the New Economics.
Well said, and I'll just look at it strictly from being in and around the financial services business, especially in some of the investment banking circles. I disagree that you've not seen progress. Maybe progress feels to you when you're inside the forest, you don't see it, but when you're out, when you're outside, you do see it. And think about it, and John said it well, the economics of Iceland. You can also look at the economics of a currency, right? What gives a currency its strength? That you think about the credibility, the fundamental underpinnings, and it comes down to the promise as well. John was spot on when he said, it was brilliant when Iceland came back and said, now listen, last I checked, you're investing this money in a small nation with 350,000 people whose primary export is fishing, and you're investing this money from a financial services perspective to try to get this return back. And I just thought it was fantastic the way that Iceland handled that. And you're hitting each of the elements. Number one, the credibility. You're coming back and saying, we are credible. We said no to the risks that you took. And we said no to that. Number two, the fundamental underpinnings are still sound, are still there. And then therefore that promise to pay comes back as well. So what I see and what I hear is that there is progress being made, but it's a slow healing process. It has to happen in several areas. And then that builds on itself as it goes through. So again, not knowing exactly what you're doing here inside the country, but keep doing what you're doing, because from what I see on my side of the table, it's working.
It's 5:04, so this will be almost the end of the day. We have a cocktail waiting.
Cocktails.
I would,
Cocktails?
Icelandic style, yeah.
Oh, good.
Cocktails, yeah, I guess. Cocktails. What's this one?
My Icelandic is not that good, and cocktails translates well in all languages. It's good.
We're going down the pub.
Absolutely.
I would like to thank all of you here today for coming. I think it's very likely that we'll do this in a year. I would like to thank our sponsors, all of you, thank you. And last but not least, I would like to thank the speakers. Thank you very much for coming to Iceland and speaking to us of such wisdom. You know, I was hoping to end to some kind of conclusion, but I guess I'm more confused now than I was at the beginning. So no, I think they're all pretty much on the same boat, you know. They say.
Why don't you conclude? What did you hear that are common themes?
I'm sorry? The common theme?
What did you hear that were some common themes?
That's the conversation in the pub.
I think that's
maybe you should. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So, thank you very much.